topic is Teamwork Makes the Dream Work. I'm Letitia, and I'm excited to be your host for today's webinar featuring the one and only Crystal Radke from Creative in Life. We'll get started with Crystal's presentation in just a moment, but first we have a few housekeeping details for you. For better audio-video quality, close other applications like Skype that use bandwidth. If you are having any audio or video issues, try refreshing or changing your browser. We will be using the question feature today since everyone is muted during the webinar. If you have a question, type it in the box. Let's practice now. Everyone find the question box and type where you are from. Oh, people from all over Ohio, Las Vegas, I love it. For attending live today, you will receive a few things from us. One is your certificate of attendance. Your certificate will be emailed to you within 2 days. The email will also contain a link to today's broadcast. Also, all attendees to this broadcast that's live will receive Crystal's freebie. That will be an editable calendar and a newsletter template. Make sure you download it as soon as possible after you receive the link, as the link will only work for 1 week. Also, 5 lucky winners will get a 1-year ESGI license. Winners will be announced at the end, so make sure you stay on until then. There is no need to register for prizes. The winners are chosen randomly. We at ESGI are thrilled that so many of you registered to learn with Crystal today. Thanks to all of you who are dedicated to helping children and families. Now I'm going to turn it over to Crystal. Let the learning begin.
Hello, I'm Crystal Radke, and I'm very excited to be here with you this evening or later on for the playback. Today we're going to talk about Teamwork Makes the Dream Work and how to create relationships with your students' parents and how to be able to work together for the success of each child. Before I get started, I'll share a little bit about me. This is my family. I will share throughout this time about my children a little bit, just because it will address a few of the questions that several of you had about how to give news to parents for children that are struggling behaviorally or academically. All 3 of my children are adopted through foster care, and they all have either ADD or ADHD. They're all dyslexic, learning disabilities. My youngest is on the spectrum, and so I know what it's like to be the parent on the opposite end, going to 504 meetings every single year, getting testing and for your child, and then, you know, hearing that things are going to be a struggle for them, and how can we help them to be successful. So I definitely think that has helped me a lot as a teacher and as a speaker, because I have empathy for those parents. And so we'll talk about that as we go along in the presentation. But this is my family. That's my husband, Nick. We've been married for over 16 years, and he's my favorite. And those are our 2 fur babies, Rudy and Ellie. I write the website creativeinlife.com. The heart of my website is to offer a collective experience for teachers, not just what you do in the classroom, but what you do in life, planning trips, talking to your own children, navigating through things in the classroom. And so you will find not just education, but a lot of life applications on my website, because I believe in encouraging educators in all areas of their life, because we need you good, we need you whole, because what you do is so, so important in the classroom. And I definitely think it's one of the most important jobs out there that we have. So if you're on Teachers Pay Teachers, I'm Creative in Kinder. The editable newsletter and notes product that you're going to get is a paid product. You can purchase it for $4 if you are watching this later, but hopefully you're here so you can grab it for free for the next week, and I'm hoping that you will utilize it to do some of the things that we're going to talk about today. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, all the places at Creative in Life. Okay, so let's get started with communication. there were a lot of questions that came in, and so I'm going to try to address them in different areas, and at the end I will go over specific questions that you submitted. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that, because it really helps the presenter to know how to meet your needs. We'll start just with blanketed communication. I was very fortunate to be under administrators who really taught me good practices when it comes to communication with parents. And that was being taught a deposits and withdrawal system. And what that means is that before you withdraw something, meaning, having to make some sort of negative, have a negative conversation. And negative doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong, but sometimes it's perceived as negative information from the parent, because no parent wants to hear that their child's been in trouble. No parent wants to hear that their child is struggling in school. And so for them, that might be a negative communication, because it's not what they want to hear. So it's really important that we deposit plenty of positive in before we decide to make a withdrawal. So that communication is, they look at you as more as a teammate and not just the person calling because there's an issue. And so I know for myself, we did, with the hurricanes and stuff and the flooding in Texas, we did a lot of fundraisers here. I'm in Texas, and a few months ago, the high school principal called my boys' school, and my heart just dropped to my toes, because I'm like, oh no, who's in trouble now? But really, they were calling to ask about donations, and I was like, oh, but then I realized, well, I really hadn't, they don't really do that with big kids. Received a positive phone call just when they're in trouble. But that was a good reminder to me. That's the exact feeling that a lot of parents feel when they see the caller ID of the teacher or the school. They might even hope their child's sick, and it's not, the conversation of your child's in trouble again. So how do we address the deposit part? Well, the first thing I do before school starts, also, I'm not currently in the classroom, so when I say what I do, I mean what I did. And so, but what I did was I would call all parents before school started, and I would say, hi, this is Crystal Radke. I'm so excited that your child's going to be in our kindergarten class, and we're looking forward to a great year. I'm hoping that you and I can work together for the success of your child. Or do you have any questions that you would like to ask? And just kind of go over, when Meet the Teacher is, and just basic information. Yes, it does take time, especially if you want to do it from a school phone. Sometimes you have to do it in the evening because parents aren't always available during the day. But it's important. It's important to go ahead and open that line of communication, because I wanted them to see me as an asset and as an advocate for their child, that everything that went on in my classroom wasn't about me. It was about the students in my classroom and how that would work out. Another deposit we always made was the first week of school. So during the first week of school, we would go ahead and contact parents and just give them a little update and really focus on the positive feedback. Your child is adjusting very well to class. They've made a few friends, or they've made a friend, or even if the child is struggling, there is something that you can find. I saw Billy push in chairs today for his classmates, and that was so important because we've been talking all week about why we push in chairs, and that is to keep us safe, because if chairs aren't pushed in, children trip and they get hurt, and then we're not safe. And so we have those conversations initially, so later if I have to call them back even the next week and say, I'm so sorry, but we are struggling today, and Billy has been running in classroom, and I've asked him 3 times, and I think maybe he should have a conversation with you, because before this escalates. And if that is the first conversation that we have had, and I haven't already deposited those 2 positive phone calls prior to that conversation, they probably off the bat aren't really going to like me. They're just going to think I'm the carrier of the negative information, and that is not what I want for our relationship. For my own children, because I know they struggle. I know they have learning disabilities. I know they have attention issues. And so I always made it a point, especially through their primary, elementary, middle school years, to email the teacher immediately before school started, if not the first day, and just say, I appreciate you, and that you always hear that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, my family takes 2 villages, and you're an important part of that village. And I realize not a lot of parents are like me and might not do, when I know that my kids really being tough, email over a Starbucks gift card and say, thank you for not giving up on my kid. I realize that's not every parent, but I think it's important that, advocating for your child goes both ways. And since they do spend the most time with you during the day, we need to make sure that there is a really strong bridge between you and the parents. So your first meeting usually starts with Meet the Teacher. For Meet the Teacher, I had folders outside of my classroom door with each child's name on it, and inside the folder had a lot of different color-coded papers, and I made them color-coded so I could keep up with them easier. One of the papers they would fill out was the parent questionnaire, and this just helps me get to know the parents and the students. And it's important that if you have parents take the time to fill this out, that you really read it and do something with the information. I have been guilty of taking all of this information and then not really investing the time to go over it as well as I should in the past. And so I think that's really important that that we are disciplined to do that, because one thing we're lacking is time. So we have to make sure we make time for things like these. So I have parents fill out these questionnaires. What their student likes, dislikes, their goals, their concerns. Sometimes these answers are going to be realistic. Sometimes they're not, and you just have to just go with it. And often, sometimes, answers can hurt your feelings. What are the goals for this year? I just want them to be your problem, or whatever you do, I don't care. Like, whatever those answers are, we have to remember that parents are giving us the best of themselves, and they're only giving us what they know how to give us. And so often if you have a child that has a behavior issue, might have a smart mouth, might do things that, are completely uncalled for, you have a parent meeting, and it explains a lot, their interaction, the way they communicate between each other, the level of acceptance for a parent, what they allow their child to do. And so that explains a lot. And, being a foster parent and an adoptive parent, I have learned that my children's biological parents, my children were abused and neglected, and they came from a difficult background. But I also know my children's biological mother was bipolar, and she lived in foster care most of her life and was adopted late as a teenager. And so knowing that, I know that she did the best she could doing what she knew how to do. And so we need to remember that and try so hard to give parents grace, because often their communication style, their parenting style is what they know. And so that makes your influence even better, more important, not better, even more important, because the influence you have on their child can absolutely affect them for the greater good. So just remember that. Try not to be hard on yourself when parents fill out this type of information. And we all know that there's going to be parents out there that view you as a babysitter, that make comments like, I pay taxes, so I pay your salary. There are going to be parents out there that are going to hurt your feelings and say things like that. And just try to take that with a grain of salt, because usually those words don't come directly from them. Those are things that they've heard, they've learned, they think are acceptable, and they're not. But don't let that consume you. Okay, I also give them a volunteer sheet, and I think a lot of parents want to volunteer, but they don't know how. Some work and they aren't able, but there's things they could do at home. Some that don't work, don't have vehicles. So you have to figure out how to include them. So one thing I did is I sent this volunteer form home. I can cut staple and glue materials. I'm interested in helping with field trips. I can plan class parties. Those are pretty much the regular. a lot of consideration goes into volunteers, and I usually don't allow volunteers even in the classroom the first month of school because there's a lot of adjustment going on. And for some children, they cannot handle it when their parent is at school. And so I have had conversations with parents saying, I really appreciate you and your willingness to come and be helpful, but it maybe if you can, I can set a bucket in the hallway and you can help in this area or at home, but I just don't think it's beneficial because, Billy loses focus or he doesn't participate when you're here. And at the end of the day, his education and his participation is what's most important to me, as much as I need help, and so having those conversations is important. What do I do with this information? So parents bring back this We Love Volunteers paper, and then I create a ring of colored cardstock or note cards like you can see here. And maybe on the pink sheet, I have everyone who can cut and staple and glue materials. And then on the next card, I have everyone who's interested with field trips or whatever it is. So if I need something, I have this ring on a thumbtack by my desk, and I just look at it. Otherwise, that information just kind of, when it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I can't tell you how many times before I came up with my I love all rings of all things, when I came up with rings, I would think, oh, I need this done, I need this done. But I didn't stop to dig through papers or the file that had this information in it. So when I got this information, I immediately put it on the ring, and it made life so much easier for me. I also kept labeled Ziploc bags that I would send home with parents, along with standard directions for cutting, laminate, and putting things together, that kind of stuff. I also included a Meet the Teacher page, which is about me, because just like it's important for you to get to know your parents, it's important for your parents to get to know you. Who's in your family? I think that's important for us to tell our parents, not because, I know there might be part of you that says they don't need all that information. I understand that, but I also believe that it's important for parents to remember that we're human too, that yes, I am your child's teacher all day long, and I love them, and I try so hard at my job, but I also need you to know that I am married, and I have 3 children, and when I go home, that is my responsibility. And so sharing information about yourself is really important because unfortunately, often we have to humanize our own selves. We have to remind people that, hello, we're people too. We have families. We have a life outside of school. We have feelings. And I think that's really important to take the time to do that. This is a communication log that I have for free in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. And it's a half page. I'm showing you the front and back in one image. And I printed on bright cardstock and cut it in half, punch holes in the corner, and put it on a ring. And the ring goes by the phone. This is great because if I need to pick up the phone to call a parent, I don't have to stop and get in the computer to look up any phone numbers. I don't have to look in a notebook. I don't have to do any of that. It's all there all the time. And so it has you can see the name, the parent information, email, medical concerns, things like that. But on the back is a communication log. And I don't know about you, but often I struggled with writing down and keeping it in one place with every time I communicated with a parent. So I would put date, phone number, if it was a conference or an email, and comments. So if this is what we discussed, these are our goals. And sometimes, I needed more pages, and that's okay. But that was a great way for me to have it on hand at any time, and also for me to be able to document, because as well as I know, documentation is so super important in all things, and it protects you. It protects you because you have parents say, they didn't call me, I don't know what they're talking about. You can say, well, but I do have this log, and it does show that we spoke 4 times in the last month, and I've addressed these specific concerns, and you have that documentation. And so I think that's really important to come up with a system that's going to work well with you to provide that. So let's talk about parent meetings. There's different type of parent meetings. You can have a meeting with just you and the parents, or you can have a meeting with you, the parents, and the child. And so It just depends. We always had a conference at the beginning of the year, and it was just myself and the parents, and there were goals for that meeting. When would I bring a child into a conference? Sometimes it would be a middle end of the year to go over goals and progress, and sometimes it's behavior, so we can come on with the same plan because sometimes children think that they can pull the wool over your eyes and that mom and dad aren't on your team when they actually are. So I think it's important that they see you working together and that you have them come to the meeting. And, today we're going to address these concerns we have with you. And together we're going to come up with a goal. And, your mom and dad and we're going to work together to help you be successful. But you need to know that you have to be accountable for these things at home, and you have to be accountable for these things at school. And this is how we're going to support you. And I think that's an important conversation to have with some children, because I've been told, well, my mom's not going to do anything about it before my child multiple times. And so when that happens, I ask parents to come in and we have that conversation in front of the child, because I need them to know that hopefully they're wrong, and that we're going to be on the same page. So for the first initial parent meeting, what do we go over? Well, I go over expectations for the year. I always love it at Meet the Teacher when we're looking at parts of the classroom, and I tell parents that it's our classroom, we're a class family, and our family takes care of each other. And part of that means we keep our classroom clean and organized. And I love when parents say, well, good luck with that. My kid never cleans or rolls her eyes or whatever. And usually it's their child who volunteers to be helpful first. And so we talk about rules and expectations. We talk about choices and consequences, and then I show them academics, because kindergarten is different from, I would say 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, kindergarten then versus kindergarten today is different. I told them we don't take naps, and that this is what our schedule looks like, and kind of walk them through it. And then I show them readers, and I say, this is a level A, and this is what a level A book looks like. And we kind of go through 2 pages, and I said, this is level D or level E, and this is the expectation by the end of the school year that your child is an independent reader and can pick up this book by themselves and read it. And often when I do that, their jaw drops and they say, whoa, that's like real reading. And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's real reading, lots of words and sentences. And so, but I don't think they have that grasp on reality of what it actually is until they see it. And so I'm a visual learner also. And so a lot of things I do kind of function off of, sometimes what I would need as a parent. And so I tell them that, and I show them all of those things. And, this is the expectation for math. This is our goal, because I think it's really important that, we send home assessments and report cards and things like that. But I think it's important that we also give parents a bigger picture, meaning this is where we are today, but come May, this is where we're going to be. And your child is going to be, I am confident your child will be able to successfully, write numbers to 20 and do simple addition and be able to spell CVC words or whatever it is, read 100 sight words. I think it's important to let parents know what the end all goal is. So when you're asking them for help along the way, they see more purpose in it, because without that help, sometimes we don't get there. Something else I give parents usually middle of the year, because beginning of the year hopefully happens pretty quickly and we haven't had enough time to assess, but is the parent sheet print off from ESGI. I used ESGI, I believe 3 years in the classroom, and I loved it. I love the time it saved me for assessments, but I also love this parent sheet, because I don't know about y'all, but our report cards, I swear they were printed in a font of like 6. They were so tiny. It was kind of overwhelming because a lot of it's developmental. So that it includes so much, and we didn't do grades. It was just, they've mastered this, or this is satisfactory, or whatever it was, plus and minus. And so it's a lot of information on one sheet of paper, and it's the information for the year. And so I found that very overwhelming. And for parents to be able to really see what they needed to help them at home with, or oh my gosh, I don't know if you can hear my dogs, but they're crazy. I'm sure my husband's like wrangling them in there. Anyways, sorry, squirrel. And so I love the parent printout because it shows you what they do know and what they don't know. So it's a good picture of where they're lacking. You also have the capability to print off note cards for what they don't know, and I love that too because I can attach that to this paper, and hopefully, you know, the only thing you can do when it comes to parents is encourage them. To help at home. They have a choice whether or not to do that, and some parents choose not to do that, and that is very unfortunate for their child. They're doing a disservice, but you can certainly try. Communication. So email is a great tongue twisted. Email is a great form of communication because it's convenient. But sometimes email can get you in trouble just because you don't know the motive or the tone behind an email. And you know, emailing back and forth, it's real easy to be discouraged or frustrated or even angry because someone has emailed you information or, you know, their opinion about something, and you make assumptions based on what they said, of what you think it implies. And so I would always encourage teachers to pick up the phone and make a phone call. I know it takes more time out of your day and it's not as convenient, and I can type 1 billion words a minute, and so that would be so much easier. And but when it comes to more important matters, you might email and then follow up with a phone call. Email is good for documentation because it's always there, and you can print it out and put it in their file and show, no, I did email this parent 3 times and reminded them, or I've emailed them and they've never responded. But I think also, you know, and that's okay to do in every circumstance, just so you have documentation. But I also think it's important that there are some things that you just shouldn't put in an email, or if you are, you know, when in doubt, don't. I also have a personal rule. In the district I taught out for several years, there was a rule that we had to respond, I think, within 48 hours to all parents. And so I had a personal rule that if I received an email that I found frustrating or an attack, that I would not allow myself to respond until the next day. Because often if I respond emotionally, I might say things that I regret, or I might not be able to look at the situation for what it was because I allowed myself to be emotional. So I always had a 24-hour rule that I really felt like helped me maintain my composure, keep my job, all of those things. So just be conscious of that, and really, you know, you're going to have positive and negative feedback from everyone in your life, including parents. And we have just got to learn to be reflective. My husband has always told me that, you know, Crystal, when people are giving you criticism, in most points of criticism, there has to be an ounce of truth in it. So whatever that truth is, that's what you need to find and make adjustments. And I felt like that was really, you know, because sometimes I get a little bit dramatic and he tries to handle me. And that was really good advice because, you know, sometimes we can be on the defense and miss the learning opportunity. So I would just encourage you in that area when it comes to communication. I also had a take-home notebook that in that notebook, there was a calendar that was for the entire grading period, usually 6 weeks. With dates and little reminders on it. And I functioned in a manner that no news was good news. I think we have train parents that they need daily feedback, and actually they don't. Neither do children. They do not have to have a sticker or a stamp every single day. We've trained them to require that, in my opinion. And so I didn't do that for my students or my parents. And I told them, no news is good news. If I have an issue, I might write a concern on their paper, but or I'll call you. But otherwise, I mean, I definitely believe in keeping, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I believe in keeping up with communication and documenting, but I did not want to take the time every day to stamp all the, 24 notebooks or whatever it was. And so that was really just for communication for me and parents, and it wasn't necessarily about the child. And so, but I did utilize a notebook, and that was very beneficial for us. Let's see. Why isn't this working? Okay. I also sent home notes, special notes, field trip notes, bring an apple. We're going to be making applesauce next week, or we're having a holiday party. I sent home a newsletter every week, and in that newsletter, it included the calendar for the upcoming month, dates to remember, new learning, reminders, things like that were in the weekly newsletter. And so my parents knew to expect that to go home. I did it on Fridays for a long time, and then I changed to Mondays because I'm sure you realize that a lot of parents just don't open notebooks on Friday or backpacks, and that's okay. I'm sure they want to disconnect from school just as much as we do. And so I changed, and I started to do Monday newsletters, and I felt like that was more beneficial. When it comes to behavior, why isn't this working? Okay, behavior. Do you like the little girl screaming and the boys cleaning up? So let's talk about that in communication. When I am working with my students, I talk to them about choices. And I use conscious discipline in my classroom the last few years. And if you're not familiar with that, I would strongly suggest that you Google it, and it'll bring up the website. There's a lot of great information and free resources, but I definitely think the books and CDs are worth buying. But I utilize that, meaning we did not have a card flipping or clip chart or anything like that in the classroom. I felt like it made me a more responsive teacher, meaning if there was an issue, it was easy for me to get frustrated with the child and just say, go flip your card or move your clip. But without that, when that was gone, it forced me to be proactive and actually deal with the issue in hand and deal with the root of the issue is. Why are they acting that way? So I always taught my children, we have positive choices and negative choices. And with everything that we choose to do, there's a consequence. And there's positive consequences, and then there's negative consequences. And we talk about what that looks like. But these are also conversations that I have with my parents, because I want them to understand the terminology I'm using with their child, the expectation with their child. And I have had parent conferences when their child comes to school and they curse a lot. And I will say, that might be acceptable in your home, but it is unacceptable at school. And if they choose to make that negative choice in the classroom, they will have a negative consequence, and then what it would be. And so whatever vocabulary I use with my students, I try to be very consistent, and I try to make sure and use the same vocabulary with the parents. So hopefully they start using it too, and then we're all on the same page, which I think is important. Warning. So if a child is misbehaving, I will tell them, this is your warning. I need you to stop. But I don't give them multiple warnings. I was never the parent that said, I'm going to count to 3 and you better get over here. Well, 2 of my boys when they were younger had ODD. That's oppositional defiant disorder, and it's exactly what it says. And so my boys knew if I counted to 3, they would wait till 3 to do what they were told. And that really upset me. So I didn't do counting. I quit counting. And so, I will remind my students that, you need to make a better choice. That's not okay. Or remember, you're supposed to do this. But if they don't, then they go into a consequence. And sometimes that consequence is parent phone calls. If I've asked them to do something and we continue to struggle, it didn't matter what we were doing in the class. I will stop and I will get up and go to the phone and grab my little ring and find their parents' phone number, and I will call them. And I think the important thing in that is, it's hard to find balance of you don't want to be the mean teacher, as some would say, but I think it's important that you are consistent and provide structure, because children thrive on structure. And it's crucial at the beginning of the year that we just stick to our guns and we do exactly what we say we're going to do. Don't say, if you stop that, you're gonna, if you don't plan on doing the you're gonna part. And so be consistent with that. So when you call parents and you say, I asked him to do this and he chose not to, maybe you can speak with him before this escalates and I have to send him to the office, because that would be so sad. And so I always allow students the opportunity to speak with their parents. And I have had parents come up to the school, and I mean, there's been one or two times when a parent has questioned, well, why are they required to do this, or what is wrong with this? And then you have to explain, well, it's disruptive to other children, and their participation is important. And sometimes there's just going to be parents that you can talk to your blue in the face and it's not going to matter, and you're just going to have to move along, I guess, because you just cannot let that person, that scenario, just steal away the rest of your joy that you will give to their child who needs it. Because you have to think that if that parent is being that negative to you, they are probably that negative to their child at home, which means that they might need an extra serving of patience and grace and love from you. And when I say patience, that doesn't mean feel sorry for them and allow them to get away with things, because that is not going to help them be successful. And throughout my children's life, people know their story, and I always tell them, please don't feel sorry for my children. Do not do extra things for them, or allow them to do more than other children get away with, or whatever, because we're not raising victims, we're raising survivors, and we're raising adults. And I think that's really important. And some parents have trouble adulting, and so we're going to do the best we can to plant seeds in their children. And I can honestly tell you, I have seen a change in parents because their child changed. So don't ever believe that what you're doing isn't important and can't impact the parents too. I've had parents call me and say, my child doesn't want me to say bad words anymore, or, this is unacceptable, and why, and, cleaning up things and singing songs that we sing and all of those things. I mean, these children are sponges, and you have such a great influence on them. And that influence in turn has absolutely the capability of impacting that family. Modeling and practicing. Don't ever assume that children know anything. I mean, you know this. You're a good teacher. You model everything. You model how to write, how to hold a pencil, how to sit in a chair. But you also have to model social development. And that's so important, because a lot of children aren't getting that at home. And this is also the learning opportunity when it comes to teaching parents. And so, and what I mean in social development, apologizing. I learned this from a really great teacher just by watching her model with her students. So this is how that would go. If we're on the playground and Billy and Sarah are playing, and Billy comes up to me and says, Sarah's pushed me. And I would ask Billy, how does that make you feel? And he would say, that makes me feel sad. And I said, okay, look at Sarah. Of course, Billy thinks Sarah is in trouble. So he's all, nana, nana, boo, boo, you're in trouble. And I bring him over, but they're not. And I tell Billy to face Sarah. And I said, Billy, tell Sarah what you just told me. And start with, I don't like it. And so Billy tells Sarah, I don't like it when you push me. And I said, how does that make you feel? And he said, sad. And I said, okay, tell Sarah that makes you sad. And he says, that makes me sad. And then I asked Sarah, what do you think about that? How does it make you feel? Well, it makes Sarah feel sad. And I said, how can we fix this? And then she says, I won't do it again. I said, well, tell Billy that I will try my best not to do it again. And then Sarah says, I will not push you again. And I tell them to solidify it with a handshake or a hug. And then Billy and I tell Sarah, you should apologize. And usually Sarah just sits there, and I'm like, Sarah, an apology starts with "I'm sorry," and you want to lead them into that conversation. I'm sorry for doing this. And then the other person, often they say it's okay, and I say no, it's not okay, and I don't want you to say it's okay. You can say I forgive you or I accept your apology. And so. And so they say this, they hug it out, they go play, and they're fine. But by doing that, yes, it's kind of draining to do that over and over again, multiple times a day throughout the day. But after you're consistent with that and teaching your kids how to problem solve on their own, it's helpful. And so when I work with parents and I talk with parents, I tell them exactly what we do in the classroom. And I have the same conversation that I just had with you with them, because maybe nobody's ever had that conversation with them on, in our classroom, we take care of each other, and how we take care of each other is we apologize and we talk about our feelings and just all of these different things that are really important. Documentation, how are you going to document behavior? This is really important, because if you're going to call a parent conference, you should have documentation. Is that going to be on the behavioral folder? Are you making copies of that behavioral folder if it never comes back? Are you keeping a behavior communication log every time you have to call a parent? That's important. If you're having a major behavioral problem, you need to let your administrator know. And this is important for multiple reasons. First of all, you need to be supported. And it might not be administrator, maybe it's the instructional coach or someone that is supportive, but you should definitely clue in your administrator, and here's why. Because when you pick up that ring to call that parent and you tell the parent this and they think their baby has been treated wrong, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to call the principal. And if the principal already knows that, and I keep saying Billy because the only name that pops in my head, if you have a kid named Billy, I've never had a bad Billy. I'm sure Billy's wonderful, so don't think anything like that. But if Billy's mom calls, said, his teacher's doing this, and he, and gives the principal an earful, it is helpful if that principal or administrator has already had a conversation with you so they know how to back you and say, and they in turn can reply with, I understand how you feel, and you're saying, I have met with Ms. Radke and she has made me aware. I've also observed Billy and saw him in class, and he's working towards his learning goals, and it's important to have your support at home. So it's really helpful so they don't always feel blindsided. Observations. If you have children struggling, and this is not just behaviorally, this is academically, you need to have people coming in and observing them and making notes, because sometimes, unfortunately, our words, when they come out of our mouth, our opinion, even though you're not a teacher, unless you have a degree, you are educated, sometimes that's not valued, unfortunately. And you have to have a team of support to prove that you know what you're talking about. And so if that is required, then provide it. It's not a big deal to say, hey, could you come in, the counselor or instructional coach or whomever, assistant principal, can you come in and observe what we're doing? I have a student that's struggling, and I think it would just be good just to have another opinion or insight or documentation. Other teachers. So your students most likely go to a PE teacher, a music teacher, other people that they see. And if you're needing more support to help with parents, you need to reach out to those other teachers or support staff and say, hey, these are the areas that I'm struggling. Because sometimes some support staff, they're really great about documenting when students misbehave or if there's an issue. But then some just don't, because they have all these kids in there and they're only in there for 30 minutes or less. And so they don't. And so I think it's important that you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with Billy's mom in 2 weeks. I know he has gotten in trouble in PE, and but there really isn't documentation of that. So if you could please just start writing it down or emailing me so I can put it in his file, that would really show that it's not just in my classroom. Because a lot of times parents say, well, I don't know what he has a problem in your classroom when he does great in English and art and lunch and whatever else, when actually that's not the case. So seek that outside support. And then be prepared to call your parent meeting, and just when you call your parent, and those are hard parent meetings to have. When you have a parent meeting because a child is not practicing self-control, or they're having academic struggles, those are difficult conversations to have. I can't tell you how many times I've sat with parents and we've had the, I think we should pursue dyslexia testing or this, and they get emotional. On the opposite end, I'm a mom I'm dyslexic actually, but all three of my children are. And I can say, I understand how you feel. I've been through that as a parent, but I need you to know that they can still do wonderfully in school, and they can still be so great and successful in life, and just encourage them, because that's what they're wanting or needing. Whenever I have parent meetings, I function the same manner that I do with my students. When there's a concern, I start with a positive, I address the concern, and I end with a positive, because again, we're working on that deposit withdrawal system, and I think it's really important that we don't just focus on the negative. The same thing for parent phone calls. I tried to make a point that if there is that parent, okay, I've called them twice this week because this child is getting out of control and we're having these issues. I want to make a point that as soon as I observe that they're doing something positive, to let them know, because I don't want them to think that their child is that kid, because I understand what it's like to be a parent of that kid. My one of my sons was in kindergarten. He was the one that threw chairs and had to be restrained often, and he really struggled. It was soon after we started fostering him. And so I understand what it's like to be that parent, and that is hard too. And you've got two sides of parents when you have that kid. The parent who their heart breaks and they don't know how to help or what to do. You have another side of parent that is not willing to believe that their child did anything wrong, because pre-K never called or wrote a note home. and then you have the parents that honestly don't care. And that's very sad and unfortunate. And you have to come up with a plan for that. So, but yeah, those are all important things when coming prepared. Facebook is my favorite form of communication when it comes to parents. It took me a few years to get permission to start a Facebook group, a private group for my class, but oh my goodness, it was the best thing ever. I created a Facebook group. It was private. I didn't have to be Facebook friends with my parents, and I did not want to be. But I created the group, and I sent the link to my parents, and they had to request access to enter. Part of the Facebook group, it was an all or none situation. Meaning I chose, then this is my choice. I chose for all my parents to sign a release, specifically for Facebook. And I told them that, and if they didn't return it, or I would call them or email or whatever, I made sure to get hold of people. That if everyone didn't do it, if everyone didn't participate, we weren't going to do it. And that was because the way I planned to utilize it. I wasn't going to take videos and ask a child to sit out. I wasn't going to take pictures and ask them not to be in it. I wasn't going to do that to my kids, because I think that emotionally that's difficult for them. But luckily they all agreed, and it was so great. I had an administrator in my group, and so they could always see what was going on if they wanted to know what was going on. So what did I post? I would post videos of sight word songs we would sing, and so they could practice them at home, or the parents could just see. Anytime we did science projects, we did Project Lead the Way. We did a lot of STEM activities, and anything we did, I would post that. I would post art projects as we were creating them. I would read books, but children would also read books, and that's great. When it was their birthday, I posted their birthday celebration, because often parents can't come to the classroom for birthday celebrations, not because the school didn't let them, just because they couldn't come to school. And so I wanted them to see that this is what we did at school, and we love your child, and they are so special to us. Reminders and updates. Y'all, I did those newsletters every week for years. Do you know that I started my Facebook page in August when school started? And in January, I quit sending home newsletters, and not one parent noticed. Not one parent noticed, but they did notice what was going on in the Facebook group. And I knew that because in a group, you can see who has seen your post. So I always knew who saw the post and didn't see the post. You also have complete control. I had my settings set to where they couldn't add people. Anytime they posted not a comment, but when they posted like a new thread, it had to have administration approval, which was me. And so I had things set in place to protect everyone in this scenario. If there were lockdowns, often, and it happens, especially if you're in a bigger city and things are nearby, it wasn't necessarily things were going on in our school, but just outside and around, parents start emailing. So my parents knew that if I could access my phone, and Facebook was actually blocked on our school computer, so everything was done from my phone, that I would post on there that, hey guys, we're doing great. We're in centers. Our door's locked. We're completely protected. No worries here. Just to give them that peace of mind. Anytime there were field trips, I would probably post 100 pictures in there of all of our field trips, talk about different things that we did, centers, new learning, all of that was going on our Facebook page, and I loved it. And this is what I loved the most. As a parent, when your child comes home from school and you ask them, what did you learn at school today? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say nothing. And that's so frustrating. And so I wanted to eliminate that. And I wanted to open up conversations between parents and kids. And so I would post in there, okay, parents, today we learned about this. Ask your child about it. And so when their parent got home, instead of saying, what did you learn today? They would say, hey, I heard you did experiments with force and motion. Tell me about it. And the kid would talk forever and ever. And it was amazing the feedback I got because I gave them that knowledge and also a peek at what their child is doing during the day because they're spending more time with me than anybody else. And flipped classroom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a flipped classroom, but Facebook is a great way to do it. A flipped classroom is where you have some sort of social network where you essentially do pre-teaching. And so I could use the flipped classroom and go on Facebook and say, boys and girls, tomorrow we're going to learn about rhyming words. Rhyming words sound the same. Cat, bat, they rhyme. Come to school tomorrow with 2 rhyming words you want to share with the class. Or the same thing for parents. I could post videos on, this is how I teach children to read. At the beginning we talked about how I show parents readers. Well, it's amazing to me how many parents say, oh, I cover up the pictures because I don't want them to cheat. And I said, well, actually, that is a technique we teach them in guided reading, that they want to look at the picture and look at the beginning sound and see what sounds like that. And so they just don't know any better. And so opening this type of communication is so great because I can go on and I can reteach things to my kids. I can pre-teach, but also it's for the parents. When I say today we did subitizing, they don't know what that means unless I show them. If we're talking about part, whole, what does that mean? And so I get on and I show them, and then they're able to have those conversations at home and really support their child, which is important. So here's a few examples of my Facebook page from 2016. And I keep my Facebook pages up because every year before school starts, I say, looks like you guys are going to first grade or second grade. I hope you have a great year. And the kids love that. And we stay connected. But it's a video of, we actually had field day at Rain. So it was an indoor video. And then over here for a Project Lead the Way, we read Jack and the Beanstalk, and each student was given 10 pipe cleaners to create a beanstalk structure that would stand on its own so Jack could climb it. So I shared all of those things. I also share updates. We had a family fun run, and it was a color run where we were all going to get messy. So I reminded them to make sure, to get wristbands for the dinner, to bring towels and sheets to cover their sheets. To cover their, excuse me, sorry, to cover their car seats. And I posted this big thing in Facebook, and then I did the color run, and I totally forgot a towel or a sheet, and my car seat was like, 50 different shades of colors. But anyways, So I post all of those types of things for them to see. And I'm telling you, when I did this Facebook page, I had the more donations and participation than I ever had. It was so great. Then I post things like this. Yesterday we built ramps for our cars as part of our energy unit. We talked about ramps, inclines, force, and motion. We had a lot of fun. I'm posting pics and videos of each group, and I did that. And then you get feedback from parents. I've never seen kids having so much fun learning physics. And that is so wonderful, because you give them an opportunity to say, you know, this is awesome. That, you know, I'm not just babysitting your child. Yes, I am absolutely teaching them physics. They're learning about these things, and what they are producing is amazing. And so I want them to see that. There are a few comments about homework. How do you navigate through homework? So homework in my class has always been reading, and I would send home 2 books at a time. I met with my guided reading groups twice a week unless they were a very low group, and then I tried more than that. But I would, for guided reading, I would give them 1 book on their instructional level and 1 book on their independent level. I did that because I wanted to help with their confidence. Giving them something that they can do independently makes them still feel like they are a good reader while they're learning to grow and be on the instructional side. And so, so I did that, and I, you know, would continue to do that if I was still in the classroom. But sometimes kids don't read, parents don't help, book bags don't get open. How do I navigate through that? Well, I, honestly, one year I was really frustrated, I think 3 years ago maybe, and because we weren't reading, the kids weren't doing what they needed to be doing at home, and we're talking 10 minutes here. I was frustrated. So I came up with sticker charts, and I was trying to find something to motivate the kids that would reinforce sight word and alphabet knowledge. And so I came up with sticker charts, and on Fridays I didn't do guided reading. Instead I did sticker charts, and they had opportunity to, for everything they got read correctly, they got a huge sticker. And it was always what was going on, like Frozen or Hulk or whatever. And so they loved it. So I called every student to my teacher table on Friday, and they read their sticker chart. So for the first year we did this, it was all literacy based, and the next year I added math. So this is sticker chart 1. Then the next sticker chart 2 is numbers 1 through 5 and 10 frames 1 through 5. And so this was very motivating to my students. They practiced this more than they read their books, which I had, you know, I struggled with, but also when they did this, they were learning sight words. So I just had to tweak the way I did things, and they were more disciplined to do this and get their parent initials than they were on their book bag. I don't understand why, but I just needed them to keep learning and do a little bit more, and that's what we did. So now I'm going to answer quickly a few questions that came through. I hopefully answered them as we went along, but if not, we can address them. Do you ever deal with parents who do not speak English? Absolutely. I would love to be fluent in all languages, and honestly, I took Spanish in high school and college, and I cannot speak it. It's just so tragic. So if I know a parent is coming in, then I ask for someone who speaks that language to sit in with me and or make a phone call or help interpret letters. And so I think that's important. And, you know, your initial phone call, once you find out that they do speak whatever language they speak, you know, be on a mission to still provide that same deposit with someone who can help and interpret. So I think that's really important because they still deserve the same support. And so we just have to be creative and making sure that they get it. And yes, that means more work for us, but it's important for a child to be successful. And that is the heart of a teacher, is for children to be successful. How do you talk to your parents about bad news if their child needs to be retained, behavioral problems? If their child needs to be retained, I promise you it is not the first conversation we've had. If I bring a parent in to officially say, okay, we're at the point that I feel like we should retain your child, I can promise you there's been at least 3 conferences before that. And so I think that's important. Again, we've got to open up more lines of communication and try to reach out to parents more, even if it's a phone conversation, because they should never be completely blindsided. And so, but unfortunately, yes, you do have to have those conversations that, you know, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm observing, this is what other teachers are observing. If I feel uncomfortable, I always ask an administrator or someone to sit in. If I feel like I have to deliver tough news that might not be received well, I always ask an administrator or counselor to sit in. Part of their job is to support you, and you should never feel bad for asking for that support. And that's not an issue of pride, and that is not an issue of lack of your inability. That is that is part of your village, and you need to utilize it. And so if you need to have conversations about behavior wise, now granted, you can't say, hey, your child has ADHD, needs to be on medicine. That's illegal. But you can say, these are the concerns I have, and this is what I'm observing, and this is how it's negatively affecting their academics. You know, you might want to consider having a conversation with a pediatrician or a doctor. You know, those are conversations that are tough, but they're necessary. And unfortunately, in kindergarten or pre-K, we're the ones having those first initial conversations. How can I impress upon the parents the importance of helping with sight words and daily homework? I think that goes back to giving them a visual of the expectation that they need to know this is where we are and this is where we're going, and it's going to take all of us to get there. I think that's really important. There's going to be children that will never have parent support, and that's really sad. And it's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you. So what can you do to help that? I've had buddy classes. I was in a K-5 school, and so I've had 5th grade buddies where we would read together, or you know, I would email 5th grade teachers and say, hey, if y'all are ahead in this project, or you have someone who finishes early, you know, because there's always kids who finish early. There's 5th graders that could teach the class, and then there's 5th graders that need lots of support. It's the same as kindergarten or 1st grade or whatever. And so I would have 5th grade buddies where they would come down and they would read with them. We had a program through our high school that was like a junior teacher program. So I always asked for a high school helper. And every semester I had a different helper, and they would come in, and I would offer tutoring. And so all of those things, you know, I filled the gaps. That's basically what you have to do. If they're struggling and they're not getting parent support, we can't force that. And so we just have to be creative to fill the gaps to where it doesn't stretch us to them, because we can't give them what we are not capable of giving them. How do you handle controlling pushy parents? With lots of grace. I function in the motto of kill them with kindness. And just being a big Southern term, I guess, that, you know, how are you? I appreciate your time. I never discredit their feelings, because how they feel is real to them. How I feel is real to me. I don't say you're wrong. You know, I would say, you know, I understand how you feel, or, you know, they have a right to feel the way they feel about things. That doesn't always mean it's the right thing, but I didn't discredit that or not listen, because sometimes they just need you to listen to them. But I would definitely set up boundaries and try to handle that with as much grace. You know, I understand you would like to come into the classroom every day, but you know, we have to stick to a tight schedule. And at this time, we're just not going to be able to allow that, you know, parents to come in and, or, you know, parents that say, I've had children that they are capable of reading a chapter book, and so their parents want them to be on that guided reading level. But then I test them, and their reading comprehension is not that of a K or whatever it is, level K. And so, you know, I have to explain to them, yes, I understand your concern, and then your child is welcome to check out those books in the library and read them for enjoyment, and that is so wonderful. But I also have to do, you know, my job academically, and I have to keep this child at this level right now because they don't have the comprehension to move forward. And so having those conversations are sometimes really uncomfortable. What ways have been successful when working with parents of at-risk at-risk students and parents who are not involved. First of all, you need to figure out why they're at risk. Are they at risk because there's potential for a learning disability? If so, you need to work your steps to get them tested, because we all know sometimes that takes an act of Congress, and it's a long road. And so how can we make that happen? Or are they at risk because of lack of exposure? And if it's lack of exposure, how can we provide more exposure to catch them up? Is that going to be in form of a fifth grade buddy or an extra helper? Or, I have had really high guided reading groups where I've had students that come in. I mean, it's rare, but there's usually one or two that can read like on a first or second grade level, so when we finish our work, sometimes I ask them, hey, would you let so-and-so read their book to you? They would love to do that. And often those children like those leadership roles, because when they can do things easily and fast, that's boring to them. So giving them a leadership role is a great idea to allow other students to practice. And what do you do with parents that aren't as involved? Again, we can't make parents be involved. We can do our very best to try to show them what they're missing out on by not being involved, to express our concern, to include our administrators. All of those things are avenues, but at the end of the day, you can't make someone care about something, but you can make a difference with that child. What ideas do you have to get parents on board with good attendance? I mean, there's all kinds of different, we've done school-wide attendance celebrations. We've done school-wide games, or not games, but contests that, you can be entered into drawings, or you can do this. Personally, I feel like this is an administrative issue that, if a child's not coming to school every day, I always called and checked after 2 days to make sure they're okay, to wish them well. But if it's a problem that I wasn't here because my mom was asleep, I feel like an administrator should be calling and saying, hey, I have worked with great administrators who did pursue that, and it made waves. And what I don't agree with is when we punish our kids for being tardy every day, make them miss recess. They don't drive. It's not their fault. And so that's hard to navigate through too, because there's negative emotional consequences for the children, not just learning. How do you reach parents that won't sign up for anything? Facebook, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. You can't force them. So I send home lots of notes. I send home notes on children's risks. I send home reminders. I'll call home. If I see them at the school, I'll talk with them. All of that. I mean, you can only do what you can do. How do you choose the right words for parent communication? Again, I think I went over this earlier. I have my 12-hour rule. When I'm frustrated or upset, I'll often, send it to someone and say, does this sound okay? Or does this come off harsh or positive or whatever? I still start with the positive, end with the positive. That whole method of positive, some criticism and positive or concern, that's a really great way to even do an email. How do you grow relationships with parents you don't see? I have blogging friends that live all over the world that I've never met, and I consider my best friends. And that's just because we communicate with each other. So just because you don't see them doesn't mean you can't form a relationship with them by talking to them on the phone, or writing notes, or, emailing, all of those things. What strategies do you have? Okay, so this was kind of like teamwork makes the dream work with, and I think this is our last set of questions. But I wanted to go ahead and address it basically in one blanket answer for both. What strategies do you have if there's one staff person that's negative? What do you do if one teammate thinks they know everything? Well, here's the deal, and this is my belief. I believe every day we are given a new serving of joy, and it is our choice to give it away. And so when I work with teachers and they tell me they're having this issue, I tell them, don't go into the lounge. If you are having a great day and you walk into the teacher's lounge and they are talking about how crummy their day is, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, you're going to walk out of that room and you're going to think you're having a crummy day too, because you just let somebody steal your happy day. And so there's always going to be people who feel like they know more than you, know more than everyone. There's always going to be people with negative that are negative. And what I would encourage you to do is don't let them steal the joy that you have in your job with your students. Don't focus on that. It's really easy also for us to make assumptions. Someone could come in and look at you and you think they're giving you like the stank eye and actually they have like dirt in their eye from when they walked in and the wind blew. But you make these assumptions all day if she doesn't like me and she's mad at me, or he or she, whatever. And then later you finally talk to them about it and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, don't allow yourself to kind of make poor assumptions, and also just don't try to not to let that affect you. And I know that's easier said than done, but you really have a choice. You really have a choice to let that consume you or to let it go. And I would encourage you to let it go. I hope that this has been beneficial, that you've learned a few things. If you've asked questions during this time, I'm going to do a Facebook Live tomorrow and answer them. Feel free to Facebook message me also if you have additional questions or concerns. I will do my best to answer it. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever. The first Friday, they're going to come on and announce prices, but I wanted to tell you about this. I'm giving away a shirt today, and this shirt says Teaching with My Whole Heart. This is a fundraiser my husband and I have right now on bonfire.com. The link is on my Creative and Life Facebook page. It's also on the latest blog post that I've done on creativeandlife.com, and it's Creative with a K. This is our adoption fundraiser, and we are in the process of adopting a baby. All of our kids will be out of the house soon, graduated, and so we're not ready for that season of life, and we feel we would be overjoyed to parent another child. So I'm giving away a shirt today, and if you would like to rock one of these for Valentine's, they will be up for 4 more days. So thank you so much for coming and spending this time with you, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your year, and maybe I will see you at a conference out on the road soon.
Thank you so much, Crystal. So the winner of this amazing shirt that Crystal is giving away is Becky Long from Illinois. So Becky, please reach out to Crystal on her Creative and Life Facebook page via direct messenger so she can get your shirt sent to you. And now I want to let everybody know who the 5 winners of the 1-year ESGI license is. And the first one is Uzma Bassett from Texas. Congratulations, Uzma. We have Deborah Cattell from Maine. We have Tandra Eames from Florida. We have Flor Flores from Peru. Ooh, all the way from Peru, hey. And we have Taylor Antes from Washington. So again, the 5 winners of the 1-year ESGI license is Uzma Bassett from Texas, Deborah Cattell from Maine, Tandra Eames from Florida, Flor Flores from Peru, and Taylor Antes from Washington. We will be in touch soon to reach out to each of you via email so that we can get you your activation code so you can get started. Don't worry, we will reach out to you shortly. I want to thank Crystal again for presenting this great information today. Everyone, don't forget to check your email in the next 2 days to find your certificate of participation, your 2 freebies from Crystal, and a link to see the recording of this webinar. Thank you so much.